Yeah.
Happy Halloween, guys. Here we are, Halloween 2022, and today I want to do something a little bit special, and yes, that means I will be talking about the 1978 George Romero classic, Dawn of the Dead. Of course, I think this film kind of has a reputation that kind of precedes it. Most people say that this is perhaps the greatest zombie film of all time, and if not, certainly the most influential. And George Romero, he took some time in between making this film. I believe it was like 10 or 11 years after Night of the Living Dead came out, because he didn't really want to be associated as just a horror director. And I think it was the right decision, because when this film came out, there was nothing like it, and I think there's so many that have tried to emulate it since. This really was the benchmark for the zombie subgenre in horror. And I got the pleasure of seeing this on the big screen in 3D. Now, of course, I'm not going to be reviewing the 3D version of the film. I'm actually going to be reviewing the film itself. But I think for a film that came out in 1978 and wasn't meant to be in 3D originally, I think it did a very, very good job. It was very, very seamless, the way they emulated it into the film, and I think, yeah, it definitely didn't detract from the overall experience at all. I actually think it was quite good. Now, regardless, when it comes to the film itself, there's so many things to say about this. Now, I didn't have necessarily quite the idea of what this film was going to be like. I saw Night of the Living Dead, and I knew what that was. The acting wasn't that good, but the filmmaking was quite innovative, and I think the ideas were really there. Now, I think coming off of that film, I think George Romero kicked things up like 10 notches. Of course, hiring Tom Savini to do the makeup and all the practical effects. Granted, not all the makeup is great, but I think some of the effects they come up with this movie are really gruesome, very effective, and I really, really enjoyed that element of the film. Now, since this is a classic film, there's going to be a spoiler warning. I figured if you've seen the movie, that's why you're here. So, you have been warned. Now, the one thing I love this movie is right off the bat, they do not waste any time getting into the story. And the thing that's so brilliant about the opening few minutes of the movie, you see no zombies at all. It's just so brilliant how Romero captures this spiraling chaos going around, and how people, even within the station themselves, are arguing over, should we shut the networks off? Is this spreading more panic, or is this what the people need to kind of know what's going on? Very interesting. Sounds very reminiscent of something. I just can't place my finger on it. There's even this argument between a TV anchor and a doctor arguing over whether, what these zombies do. Like, do they bite you and then you get these symptoms, and they're just like going back and forth. And the anchor says, it's like, well, we only know what you tell us. And why are we supposed to believe that? And it is just so crazy how this film was released in 1978, and the parallels that we see today, whether it be like, COVID deniers, or, whether it comes to wearing your mask or not. It is crazy how far ahead of its time this film was, and I think that's probably the biggest compliment I have to give it throughout the entire narrative. Whether he intended to do so or not, George Romero really created these timeless situations that somehow have more weight today than they did back then when it was released. And I think moments like that really prove it. And then you get this whole break into this like inner city, I guess, apartment building, and you get the whole SWAT team coming in and trying to eliminate these zombies, but there's this one abhorrent racist piece of garbage who's like spouting off all these racial epithets, and then he's just going in and like shooting any black he sees. It is really disturbing, and you're like, just please off this guy, and thankfully they do. But I think even in those few opening minutes, there's so much seething racism and hatred that we also see in forces. So it really, there's so many things that Romero's hitting on that I think just parallel so many things that are unfortunately still so true in our society today. And here we get introduced to Scott Ranger as Roger and Ken Foree as Peter, who, let me just say, is one of the most badass characters in any horror movie, one of the best characters in any horror movie, hands down. This guy completely owns this movie, every scene he's in. And George Romero does not hold back from, obviously, I mean, we've already been talking about difficult subject matter, but he does not shy away from, like, doing really kind of taboo things in movies at the time. Like, there's these two zombie kids that attack Peter near the beginning of the movie, and he just shoots the shit out of them. It's like, my goodness, like, he did not care at all making this movie. And I think that's what makes it such a singular piece of work from a very, much an auteur filmmaker. And that's what I absolutely love about this. I mean, the structure, well, I think in some ways it helps it and it also hurts it. I'll get into that a little bit. But it really isn't structured like a conventional picture. And I think that's where this film gets a lot of leverage, because George Romero is able to craft the story to his liking and set up these characters in the way they like. Because they're not necessarily the most complex characters you ever see. Like, we don't really get into their backstory. We don't even know that much about them. All we know is Fran is with Steven, and they're a couple, but besides that, it isn't really like we delve much deep into them, but you understand them completely as characters given the situation that they're in, and how do they react to the surroundings and the circumstances that come up. And that's what I absolutely love about this movie too, how it captures how people in society would deal with a situation like this. And I think that's what the best zombie movies do. Not only do they put you into the position of the characters and kind of make you question what would you do in a situation like this yourself, but also just bringing up the moral quandaries of a situation like that, where, public health is at risk, and not only are we trying to save the population, but we're also trying to prevent the spread of it. Like, there's this one guy who comes in throughout the movie on the TV, and he's like talking about, well, maybe we should just like nuke everybody, and there's like a legitimate conversation about whether that's a good idea or not. And I don't think a lot of zombie movies, it's all about the action or the gore, and I think this goes for every horror film, but really I think a lot of people, whether it be like following the killer shark template from Jaws, or kind of like following the scary mansion thing from The Shining, I think they truly forget what makes those movies great is what is underneath. What are they saying about society? What are they saying about the way human beings interact with each other? And I think that this is a pitch-perfect example of said topic and the way it's dealt with. Another thing that this film even deals with briefly is the idea of abortion, which, I mean, for 1978 was a pretty bold statement to make. Not that it completely overrides the film, but obviously Fran and Steven are in this relationship, and Fran is pregnant, and there's even a question between like Peter and Steven, and he like asks him, it's like, oh, like I can help if she needs an abortion, and she's just listening in on this, with them not knowing that she's awake, hearing it. And it really is a very, very sobering moment for a film that, this is why I'm saying it's more than just a zombie movie. It's about everything around it that really makes it that much more interesting. And I think the brilliant thing about this movie is the setting that Romero chose for it to be set in, is this desolate shopping mall with all these zombies crawling around throughout the corridors. And you have these four people trying to survive, and the way they go about the mall, and like how to get their, how to get materials and supplies while also trying to divert their attention while they do so. But really, I mean, what makes it so effective is putting them in this very, very market-driven place. And I think, I mean, more than anything, it is obvious this movie deals with so many themes in regards to capitalism. I mean, there's literally a whole montage where these four are just going around the mall, getting anything they want. There's even a scene where like Peter picks up money and he says to Steven, it's like, we might need this, you never know. And it just, like, you see it throughout the whole movie, and I think there's a line where Steven even says, it's like, there's so many great things here, Fran, we really have it good here. And I think in some way that's him directly talking about corporate America, and how everybody's caught up in the commodization of everything, that we just kind of feel like we have it all made. And maybe that's not what it's all about. And I think it's such a brilliantly subtle line that I think really sums up the whole movie. I think you can even back this theory up further, where at the end of the montage there's a scene of the four individuals at the top of the mall on the top floor, and they're looking down, and Peter just says something, they're just like us. Because they set up in the movie that the zombies are kind of drawn to places that their human brains perhaps went to. And it would only make sense that these humans are drawn to this mall because of their indulgence in the capitalistic system. And just saying, you know, the parallels between what they're doing in the mall and why the zombies are there, I think is absolutely brilliant. But it's so well done that it never comes off as cloying, and never comes off as heavy-handed, and I think that's why this movie is so effective. And of course you get the biker gang that comes in later, and you get so much great action, them trying to defend their territory, but also, you know, obviously they got to protect themselves. But just seeing like how over and over again humans will continue to destroy each other over capitalism and greed. I mean, this is still something that we're seeing very, very much so today, and I think everybody should know what I'm talking about at this point if you don't. But these themes persist. I keep saying it, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but it's right there, and I think it's just, you can't like turn your head from it at all. But let's actually talk about the filmmaking here, because I mean, this really, as I said, this is a work of an auteur director, and I think the filmmaking is absolutely fantastic. Not the most flashy thing you'll ever see, but you can tell whether it be very, very deliberate choices when it comes to camera movement, or what George Romero is showing on screen, or sometimes even shot composition. I mean, there's this one wide at the top of the mall, which I think is absolutely astounding. As great as the direction is, though, I think Romero's editing is really one of his biggest strengths and gifts, because the way he'll cut from scene to scene is very, very deliberate, and you can certainly feel that it was a conscious decision that was made in the editing room, despite some, you know, structural issues, which I said I will get into. But really, I think that's what makes not only the action in this movie so effective, but the way we watch these characters move throughout the film. It really does feel very cohesive and very, very concise. And also, the fine line that's drawn between comedy and drama is defined so well by Romero here. You have so many great moments of levity, whether it be between Roger and Peter, or whether, you know, serious moments of dire circumstances. Of course, when Roger gets bitten and infected, and he's like having this really somber moment right before he's about to die, with Peter saying, you know, take me before I go, essentially saying he doesn't want to turn into a zombie, and doesn't even want them to have to deal with the after effects of it. I mean, it's a very, very, very human moment, and I think, yet again, those are other moments that really elevate this film to other heights. And then you see like how they develop this place they're living in throughout the course of this film, and they're just like, after a certain point, it's like, what are we doing here? I mean, you can only do that for so long and get by just fine. But that's the thing I absolutely love about this movie, because yet again, it's those difficult answers that it poses to the audience that I think really make you think, and you really sit there and do think about it. And I think part of the reason why is the middle of this film kind of drags, so you have a little bit more time to ponder on it. And I think that has to do with the structure, like I was saying. After a certain point in the middle, it's like, okay, like we get it. They're living in this mall. We don't have to linger on this for so much. But regardless, I mean, the way this film wraps up is absolutely incredible. And once again, Peter's such a badass. I can't say it enough. Like, just, I love that scene at the end where he like tells Fran, he's like, no. He's like, I don't want to go. I'm staying here. And then he gets in a room. He's about to kill himself. And then he's just like, nah, fuck it. And he just like shoots the zombies, like punching him, running out of the room. Oh my goodness. It is like one of the most triumphant moments in any horror film. And then his own theme comes up, and it's such a powerful moment, and such a moment of triumph in a film that has many ups and downs, if we're talking about character moments. But really, I mean, come on, this is an absolutely classic film. Really set the standards. Granted, I think that there are a few zombie films that are better, like Shaun of the Dead, like Train to Busan, which is probably my favorite. But think about it. I mean, Shaun of the Dead, which basically steals the title and creates its own pun on it, like, that movie wouldn't even exist without this. I mean, hell, in the opening shot of that movie is zombies outside of a shopping mall. So obviously Edgar Wright is a huge horror fan, and of course he had to homage this film if he was making a zombie film. So yeah, guys, this really, if you haven't seen Dawn of the Dead, I know it's a little bit hard to find. That's why I went to see it in theaters, and I am so glad I did. So with all that being said, I'm going to give it an 8.5. Absolute classic from 1978, George Romero. It's Halloween, so now would be a perfect time to see it. And if you've already seen it, which I'm sure a lot of you have, what do you think of Dawn of the Dead? Do you agree with everything I'm saying here? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and of course, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. You're not going to want to miss any of the content coming up, because of course we're going to finally debut the top 90 albums of the 90s. Very, very excited about that. I'm not sure the date yet. We had to push back filming a little bit, so please bear with us, but we will bring it to you very, very soon. And of course, until the next video, guys, you take it easy and you have yourselves a happy Halloween.